Hi folks, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing something a little different to my usual and talking about the newly released game for early access, Deadside. I was lucky enough to receive a key which allowed me to get in a few days early, so I figured I could use my experience to help you determine whether it's worth buying for the $20 that it's currently priced at. If you want to see me play this live, I've been checking this out for the last few days on my Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/Mr. Atomic Duck. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Quoting Deadside's Steam page, Deadside is a hardcore multiplayer shooter with survival elements. I want to open up straight away and say that this game does not include zombies. Instead, there are wandering groups of bandits to worry about. It's a breath of fresh air from the norm, honestly, and it works pretty well. The main map is approximately 225 square kilometers, but at the time of early access, the accessible areas of the map make up just 25 square kilometers in size. I'm not sure how this is going to change once people get their hands on their own servers, but for the testing period I had access to, servers were capped at 50 players, and PvP combat was very, very frequent, even with servers at half capacity. Perhaps even a little too frequent for my liking, but it really depends on whether you're looking for fast-paced PvP or a hardcore survival experience. For me, a server around maximum of 25 players would be ideal for the current map size. You'd still get regular combat and would find plenty of interaction with other players, but perhaps get your chance to gear up a little more than the basics before you get into a big fight. The map itself, I have to say, is incredibly well designed. I could spend hours exploring the map the developers for this game have built and not once check my watch to see how long I'd been wandering through the woodland for. They do a fantastic job of ensuring villages, cities, and everything in between aren't too far apart, so you're not venturing through open ground for too long and getting into a running simulator. Most lootable locations are marked on the map, but there are quite a few extra little structures and interesting sights to see which aren't marked on your map at all, which makes the world feel that little bit more alive. The roads are lined with the occasional wrecked vehicle, which can contain loot for you to snag. Leaflet aligns the broken tarmac, and you'll find yourself standing beside a quiet pond once in a while for just a moment of peace before you get back into the fast-paced combat this game has to offer. I especially appreciate the ambient sounds that the developers have managed to implement for Deadside. I was seriously impressed to hear the sound of frogs when I crossed over a stream in the woods, for example, or the sound of a distant woodpecker when venturing through the forests. When night hits, the ambient sounds change entirely, and this really helps make you feel that little bit more immersed in the experience. So, now that we've had a look at the map you'll be playing in, let's get into the main course, the combat. As I mentioned earlier in the video, Deadside describes itself as a hardcore multiplayer shooter with survival elements, according to its Steam store page. Having played now for about 15 hours at the time of making this video, I have to say that I disagree with this, and I'll explain why. The gunplay itself is very realistic, with the weapon moving around in your hands and never quite staying centered if you're moving, which is great. That's definitely the sort of thing I look for, and you will also tend to die in 2 or 3 shots depending on the weapon, so that's pretty great as well for realism. What makes the combat feel so much more casual and unrewarding to me are the features that support it. Let's say I'm killed in combat. I can guarantee I will find a firearm and plenty of ammo in the first few buildings I enter. Not only that, but I can actually see where I've died on my map and my HUD with a red skull marker. Because of the current map size, it'll only take me a few minutes to get back to my body. Do you see where I'm going with this? I can just grab a weapon, head back to my body, and try to claim my stuff before that person that's killed me has even finished looting the area. Currently, there's no stamina or stamina bar to keep you from sprinting all the time, which I think is a big oversight. Having something like this implemented would make it take much longer to get back to your corpse and serve to make combat a little bit more realistic and slow paced too. So in essence, the guns feel responsive and are fun to use, but the combat systems currently in place are definitely not what I'd call hardcore. In a game like this, I'd expect to have to go and find a map myself, let alone actually seeing where I died and being able to get back there within a few minutes. It's also worth a quick mention that spawns are random unless I've traded in some dog tags from AI I've killed at a safe zone, which gives me reputation points, allowing me to pick a spawn location. Fighting AI in Deadside is actually pretty tough in places, and I think they've generally done a really good job of ensuring that PvE combat is enjoyable. The roaming bandits have varying levels of gear and difficulty levels, so you don't really know if the people you've spotted wandering up the road are going to dome you from a distance with a single round, or spray an entire mag at you like Rambo on a bad day. They can be a bit janky in places, and I've had a couple of them drop aggro in the middle of a firefight and seemingly just forget they were being shot at altogether, but that's nothing new for early access, and for the most part they do make combat quite tough and rewarding. The base building in Deadside is simple, straightforward, and easy to work out with a little fiddling. It's how all base building should be in that sense. I will say that it does take a very long time to actually get a decent base going. A simple one square shack took me about half an hour of just cutting a nearby tree, once I'd managed to get a hammer, a saw, and an axe, which were required to construct it. At the moment, there's no form of base raiding, and bases are invulnerable to damage, but I've heard this is something the developers do want to implement later. Again, with the base building as the same with combat, it's less the actual building itself that I've had any problems with, but the supporting features, namely gathering supplies. I can hack away at a single tree for hours and it won't fall over, but it'll still give me the wood needed to build my base. If the tree actually toppled over and broke into some usable supplies, I'd be much happier with this because it would make me feel more immersed in the survival experience, but we are in early access after all, so something to bear in mind. In Deadside, you can take any of the supplies you've earned to safe zones to be traded with AI vendors. The simple to use inventory system makes this relatively easy, and the values of items seem fine for the moment. Acquiring heavy armor is going to cost you a lot of money, but that's how it should be. It's a rarity in a game like this that you'll only get if you're incredibly lucky or you shell out big. Inside safe zones, you can still fire your weapon, but they won't damage anyone inside the safe zone. Now this is where we have a bit of a problem. You will of course get those players that follow you out of a safe zone and simply wait for you to leave, then sit right on the boundary of the safe zone itself and shoot you without posing much risk to themselves. You also have safe zone campers that will sit nearby to catch players coming and going. This has happened to me personally inside of the first 15 hours of gameplay, and a system needs to be implemented that can help with this in my opinion. Even something as simple as a player being unable to take or deal damage for 1 or 2 minutes after leaving a safe zone could work here, and of course not being able to damage anyone outside the safe zone even if you're within its boundaries and vice versa. My overall opinion of Deadside is that it's a game with a lot of potential for those that prefer a slightly more casual experience than games like Scum and DayZ can offer, but it's got a long way to go, as with a lot of other survival games. Realistically, aside from building a base, there's nothing to do outside of the same loot, shoot and die gameplay loop we've seen in survival games for years. Having said that, it's $20 and it can be a lot of fun with friends just for the gunplay and exploring the sights along the way. So I think it's worth it for what it costs currently, and perhaps we'll see it go further in future. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next one.